everybody, welcome to Cookies and Careers Coffee Talk. Today we are going to talk about seasonal change. How do you keep yourself motivated after the summer, which is the season we're transitioning out? You have a lot of end of year goals in your company often, and you need a lot of projects that have to get done. And we have to think about how do we motivate ourselves and our teams to get those things done. So today I have with me Dan Cipoletti, who I call Sip, and Serge, and they're going to tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to talk about how do you get motivated, how do you stay motivated. So we're really looking forward to this conversation, and we hope you are too. So Sip, I call you Sip.
Yes, Sherry.
Sip.
I've been called a lot of things, Sherry.
Right. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now in your career.
Sure. Well, I'm at railroad construction, so I've been at railroad for about 3 years. The Chief Administrative Officer, kind of a fancy title for what I do, I guess. But I have a couple groups that that kind of work for me or on my team, and we pretty much are responsible for a lot of making sure the office runs smoothly.
That's great. And railroad construction, by the way, is literally railroad construction for those who people don't know. I think people think, oh, the railroad is just there. And they don't realize all the companies that are behind it to support it.
There's a lot of transportation happens in this country, and we do that. But quite honestly, railroad is about 20% of our business. Most of it is big civil projects, bridges and tunnels and walls and major infrastructure projects.
That's cool. Really cool. All right, Serge, tell us about what you're doing now.
Well, I've been product management leader and vice president of product management of a cloud product at Synchronous. So I've been doing it for the past 10 years.
10 years?
It's been a while, and it's classic product management and software delivery.
One day we're going to have you back, if you like this, because I think product management we could have, and actually SIP came from product management as well. I think we could have a whole episode on product management because they don't teach that product management is even a thing in college, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You don't even find out until you leave. So I think that we know a lot of product managers. We could have like a really fun and healthy conversation. So let's put that on for the next time. But for now, summer is closing. We have like summer brain where you're feeling a little bit more relaxed, but then you're looking forward to, you're thinking fall is coming, but also, oh my gosh, I had all these things on my my goals and objectives for my company. Sure. I had all these goals and objectives that I needed to complete by the end of the calendar year. Like, how do I motivate myself to get those things done? And how do I remind myself in some cases what they are? So I'm going to leave it open. Where do you want to go with this?
Let me start because I'm actually having these conversations with my team literally right now. Not right now, but kind of right now. I think part of what we do is we obviously start goals, fourth quarter of the prior year, and we develop the goals. But I always find goals are an interesting thing because, right now we're 6, 9, 12 months past when you may have done them.
Right.
And things change.
Yes.
Right? So even coming into after the summer on a regular basis, we should be looking at our goals and evaluating our goals. And some are set, they have to be, but some quite honestly are flexible, right? Because industries change, times change.
Sure.
Whether they're personal goals or career goals. So I think you constantly have to look at them and reevaluate them and try to motivate yourself to kind of get back onto them.
How about you?
So in the nature of our business, it's B2B2C. So the challenge is that you have to think about consumers as well as operators who are our true customers.
Right.
And so goals need to align towards both to some degree. Anything important to the operator is important to us by default, but obviously our product isn't going to perform unless consumers are happy.
Right.
Luckily for us, to some degree, we've adopted over the years what's called Scaled Agile framework, and it's a way to deliver software, and it's kind of done in program increment style. So we have 3 program increments throughout the year, and you're sort of forced to follow that cycle, and each cycle has preparation time. It has certain elements you have to hit in a timely fashion, and so everybody sort of operates around it. But to Sip's point, even though that structure is in place, we do have to adjust to the performance in the marketplace or what we've learned with the operators. So there is a level of adjustment. One of the challenges I find, especially with the summer, we're a global company and we have a lot of European employees, and people in Europe take long holidays. And so at this time, when you're looking at August, for example, there are people out for 2 to 3 weeks. And as soon as they come back in September, they kind of have to hit the ground running because we have a small cycle left before you get to Thanksgiving, Christmas, and other big holidays. So having that schedule in place, just to keep reminding everyone, we have a next program increment coming up, and these are the gates you have to hit, is pretty good. And we have ongoing communication via our program management organization to remind everybody, so everybody keeps marching towards the same structure.
So you're keeping the communication going through the year?
Yes, nonstop.
So actually, this transition isn't any different for you?
No,
just
not at
part
all.
of your regular course?
Absolutely.
And do you find that, so then vacation brain isn't really there because you have to hit these goals?
I think the vacation break may still be there, but whoever's going on vacation knows that there's a certain gate they have to hit, so that means somebody else has to cover for them. So when they come back, even though they might be in the days for a couple of days, somebody else took care of their job. So that's sort of the beauty of the process. And the one thing we have to be very careful with, and we've gotten caught like that in the past, but we've gotten really good at this, is understanding that the capacity to cover for each other drops significantly. And so you sort of plan in the very beginning of the year to lighten the load of the work, knowing that you're going to have capacity fluctuation because of holidays and summer breaks and things of that nature. So that's been good in terms of committing to less, knowing that it's going to happen in advance.
So you planned it that way?
Yeah.
But I think you both hit, Serge talked a lot about planning, and you mentioned communication. And if you combine the planning aspect with the constant communication and reiteration, you can solve for people not being in the office, or for people being out a little bit more frequently in the summer, because you're constantly in the communication loop, and you don't want the surprises.
No, actually, when I had a large team, I made sure every month, I had one-on-ones with my team. We all have one-on-ones, but I made sure that once a month during that, we had weekly one-on-ones, but the monthly one-on-one we spent on looking at the goals and objectives. So what were the person's goals and objectives for the year? How are we doing against those goals and objectives? So the idea was that you wouldn't be surprised at the end of the year, because I think there's nothing worse than getting to your review time and not having these things documented as you go. It certainly makes the review a lot easier if you've been working through it throughout the year, I think, right? So and like you said earlier, except like sometimes your goals change, the business changes, a customer changes, and you have to adjust.
Sure, it's about flexibility and going back to the communication aspect. The other thing are goals are big, right? So it's, and we're kind of dealing with this in some instances today, quite honestly, on my team, is, you got to break them down, right? Because they become daunting. And you kind of want to push them off because you're not sure where to start potentially. So you really have to look at them and break them sometimes into smaller pieces, whether it be milestones and then ultimately tasks. And then you start to see progress and you start to feel good, and I think you become more motivated.
So as you approach the end of the year, are there any big things like sitting out there that you're like, I really got to get this done by December, and I need to break things up in little pieces, so I need to get it done? I have to figure out how to get it done?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable,
right?
Because the year goes so fast. You look back and you say, oh my God, it's almost September already. Like, how'd that happen?
Oh, I know.
I remember saying that in July and June and whatever. So I think inevitably stuff gets pushed, and you just have to, kind of hunker down and focus, and again, allocate and reprioritize.
And do you feel like your teams have the same energy? Like, because they realize, like, the finish line is coming. The Olympics were just here, right? So, like, the finish line is coming. You can't stop when you're approaching the finish line. In fact, you have to, as we saw some of these sprinters do, right? Or the marathoner, they took off at the end. And you're just like, wow. So how do we inspire our teams to do that? It's kind of like a sprint at the end, right? I'm going slow, I'm pacing, and then boom, I got to cross that finish line.
I think both of you have done this well in your career because you've managed large organizations. And something you've mentioned, breaking things down, is when you operate in a large organization, you have executives, you have middle management to some degree, and you have people who are actually executing on the work. And they require different level of details. and a former executive that we both work with us in the past used to say ducks and bunnies. So if you're an executive level, you start at the ducks and bunnies communication, and as you go deeper, it becomes a lot more detailed. And so I find that as long as our executive team is very clear in terms of what the goals are, they get broken down through organization. And the one thing we found that it's a little bit easier to motivate people, if there is a big project that requires a lot of different people from different organizations, or silos, so to speak, then we create a cross-team approach so that we break down the silos. And as you pointed out, different members have their own small tasks, but they all come together in terms of delivering the big one by the end of the year in time. There is one in particular right now we're working on, but the way we've solved for it is by having a cross-functional team that everybody's got their own little piece broken down, and that's the one they worry about. They know that every time they go to sleep and they wake up in the morning, they got that one task to complete because they're part of the broader, bigger picture. And that siloed approach that was broken allows everybody on the team to understand what the big picture is.
So you both talk about breaking things down. Different reasons, but in the end, breaking it down to smaller pieces, right, to hit a goal. So if everybody has a little piece and you put it together, you know, you have Legos, you put them together, you get the house, but everybody has their own little Lego piece. It's a great way of thinking about it, because I think as humans, right, when we think about the big goal, it's overwhelming, and sometimes I guess it stops us.
It does.
So one way to actually help us hit our goals is by thinking about it. How do I break this, you know, this goal down into pieces? So I think that might be advice that you're saying for our viewers is, you know, if you have a big goal that you're trying to hit by the end of the year, try to break it down into smaller chunks. But also, if you're breaking it down into bigger chunks, then how do you make sure that you check yourself against your little chunks, right? Because you don't want them just to slip away.
You have to, it comes to accountability, right? It's accountability and creating your own timelines, I think.
Yep,
sometimes you have to create your own. And sometimes you have a partner who you owe something to, so they can't complete their thing until you do yours. So you're accountable to them. But I think once you break stuff down, you have to say, I need to have this done by this period of time. So if you don't have a deadline, you got to give yourself a deadline. Yeah,
and again, process, as much as, you know, when I was younger, I used to think process is boring, and, you know, people that, to Sip's point, that feel accountable, they could Superman things. And you find out very quickly that if there's communication not in place or process not in place, you could only Superman things for so long before you basically burn out. So having a process in place is really important organizationally, and so that, to Sip's point, when you plan out timelines, so to speak, swim lanes of small little chunks of work, you can then know which chunk needs to get done by what time, and teams can plan jointly together. And so they know I'm hitting the specific deadline because somebody else is depending on me to do the same. So those things, I feel like having a process in place is really good, because process does not care if you're in a summer funk or in a daze. It's just there as almost as a way to keep you disciplined.
So from process, I'm just going to move on to the next question, which is tools. Do you think it matters what tools you use as long as you have a process, or do you have tools that you recommend for people to use to sort of keep them focused on their goals?
I think it's personal preference.
Yeah.
I really do. I think some people do better with a ton of structure, and some people do better with, you know, a tick list or a weekly milestone. So I think it's somewhat a personal preference, but I think we all need those tools, right? Because we just become stagnant if we're just looking at something and we don't know where to go.
Right.
And I also find that just naturally what ends up happening in any organization, that depending on what department you're in, those are the tools you're using. I mean, if you are a product owner or a software developer, you're probably living in Jira. If you are a product management, you know, in our case, we use AHA software for broad product management planning. You're probably using that. I mean, not that there's other tools like AHA, similar tools, et cetera. If you're in IT or if you're in ops, maybe using ServiceNow or whatever. So everybody's got different tools, but as long as whoever's using the tools, they're using them consistently, then it works out. So meaning you can't have one engineer use Jira and another one use something else, but you could have different departments use the tools, to Sip's point, that are more preferential to what, you know, works for them.
I think also it depends on how people visualize information.
Sure.
So recently I told one of my daughters who's organizing something for her job is like really organizing other people. So she's using a Trello. I mean, she's using Trello, but really she's using the concept of a Kanban board. So, visually you could see it. So that might be a tool that people might want to use to help organize themselves as a Kanban tool. You're not in a software business necessarily, so they're not using AHA or Jira. They may be using Word or Excel, right?
Right. Exactly. And even in the business we're in, and a lot of it's Word or Excel, or people just literally have paper lists. But the great part about not breaking things down into smaller pieces is when you're checking them off, you're showing progress.
Right.
And once you see progress, you start to be motivated more, hopefully to complete the job.
Yeah, it reminds me of some of those other things. We also think about like our end of the year's corporate goals, but then, those stupid New Year's resolutions, they're coming up too. So maybe we should
That's why we don't make those.
Right. It's like maybe we need to break those down too. I have some goals here. Running out of time. Better break those down into small little pieces, and maybe I'll just put them on sticky notes.
Hey, there you go.
Right. I mean, I have sticky notes down next to my Peloton, so those are my little reminders for myself.
I put them on my laptop monitor.
Yeah.
Sticky notes,
Sticky
and
notes.
then I take them off when I'm done.
Yeah, so it's a simple thing, sticky note, but it still works.
And it works, like I said, personal preference, right? Everybody does it a little differently.
Absolutely. So do you set a deadline for yourself, like 2 weeks before the end of the year, I want to be done with these main goals? Or are you like, you're driving up to December 31st? How do you operate? Like for me, I'm like, I used to be like, I got to get as much done as I can, so over the holiday period, I can relax.
For me, it's very structured right now, so I kind of know that each quarter what needs to happen more or less.
Right.
I certainly know that there is in process, there's an opportunity for adjustment, as I pointed out, since we operate on these 4-month cycle. Before you hit another cycle, you can adjust, and you could adjust your goals, and then you worry for that particular cycle. That's all you care about, so that makes it a little bit easier. The other thing I would say is ongoing communication from leadership is really important, so that everybody knows who's responsible for their little small piece, where it fits in the bigger picture. And if it doesn't, raise your arm and say, I'm not sure this still fits. Do we need to adjust? And the best employees are the ones that will speak up and certainly raise the red flags if something is off. So we never really wait for the holidays, and because of that. And also the nature of our business is that operators shut down for the holidays.
Exactly.
There's IT freezes,
Right.
so you kind of have to get it done by a deadline or you're gone.
That's very true. Those IT freezes happen.
Yep.
So are you motivating your team to sort of finish a little early? I mean, I know a lot happens there around the holidays too.
A lot ends up happening, and personally, I like to finish before the holidays because that's kind of a time where a lot of people aren't around and hopefully refreshing themselves, etc. But I think what happens, at least in my experience by us, is some of them roll because new priorities come in and we kind of move on. So our bigger ones, yes, we try to get done early part of December if we can. But if we have to roll over, we'll roll over.
All right. Great. Any other words of advice for anybody trying to stay motivated before we wrap?
Break it down into small pieces and feel good about accomplishing stuff.
All right.
And remember, chances are the goals that have been set by the organization is what's going to drive your bonus. So if you can't motivate yourself with money at the end of the year.
I think that'll work. So before we wrap, remember earlier I talked about the Olympics and like the sprinter at the end of the marathon? Well, I was inspired by the Olympics too. So I made those viral chocolate muffins that were talked about after the Olympics, after they ate them in the cafeteria. So there's some in there that are really infused with chocolate, and then there's some that are just chocolate. All right, but I gave it a go. I made my kitchen a mess. So we're gonna have to eat that after as well.
Perfect.
All right, but anyway, let's try again for Catch You Later on Cookies and Careers.
All right.
All right, now you guys say it with me. Catch you later on Cookies and Careers.
All right.